Everybody sit in a comfortable position, spine erect, eyes gently closed. Shift your awareness to the Jyotishmati, the center of the eyebrows. We'll begin today's session with the opening prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. To begin our Patanjali Yoga Sutra study, let's offer our salutations to Sage Patanjali. Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacha Malam Shariram Cha Vaidyakena Vyopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. Welcome everyone for today's special Ugadi edition. What if a beautiful day for us to continue our Patanjali Yoga Sutra study. Does anybody want to share any of their big celebrations? Kiran, did you make any Ugadi Pachadi and all that stuff? Or did you make Gopi make the Ugadi Pachadi?
Yeah, so I know I made Ugadi Pachadi, nothing like what we make it back home, really. We used to, like in India, right? Mom used to make in that big pot and we would drink like in glasses. But now
Yeah.
it's like tasted in Tirtham fashion, very
Yes,
little.
yes.
But otherwise, yeah, mangoes, like they have lots of significance because of the season that we're in. So I definitely made like mango pulihora and that was it.
Oh wow! So you grated and all that stuff to make the mango
Yeah,
pulihora?
grated raw mango and just like any other pulihora we make, right? So that's usually for us mango and jaggery. These are the two like key ingredients for Ugadi.
That's absolutely. And I think Sunil Garu, any specials from your side?
I will go to Kiranji's house.
Yes, I have some tirtham left. Ugadi pachadi tirtham.
Yeah. So yeah, I just came from work and Lavanya and my son, they went to Patel Brothers to get something. I just wanted to make sure he understands and learns. That's a goal of what I'm trying to do. But yes, so far we haven't celebrated much. So hopefully we will do it in the next few hours.
I see.
No. For me, the primary goal for Ugadi is to show that there's a lot of bitterness also that we need to take in for kids, because I feel that kids here, like this generation, not just here, but they're too privileged for everything. They only get best of everything, but I want them to really practically see that, okay, Ugadi Pachadi, like how it tastes, right? You will experience the combination of everything in life, right? That was a symbolic thing I wanted to drive home.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, you're absolutely right. There is a sense of entitlement, for everything. And then a small, small change of comfort or something, it's almost like, something is, the world is coming to an end, or there is a sense of lack, significant sense of lack. But I think that's a great insight. Savita ji, what's happening in Canada?
Yeah, but I think they have a different struggles. We can't discount their other struggles. Just because it's very, my dad said, oh, I used to study in the kitchen. I can't do, I'm sorry, I can't download the same thing to my child saying, oh, I used to study. No, I think each generation, we should stop that first of all. I think they have different challenges. We should aid them to whatever the society right now is, instead of going backwards and saying, oh, I used to study in the kitchen and I ate dalda instead of ghee. I grew up eating. I still roll my eyes over that with my dad, and I'm like, okay. So why didn't you give me dalda?
The dalda is a good word actually. Dalda is a very good word.
So I'm like, I don't agree with that. They have different challenges. It's a new world. It's a different world. We have to prepare for them what it is now, than going backwards saying, oh, I did this. I don't know. I didn't like that when my dad used to say that.
I see.
Right. So yeah, Savi, that's a very good perspective, right? The only thing is they need to have perspective. right? Like basically don't take things for granted is what we're trying to say. So yeah, you have a new set of challenges, right? Like as kids, we didn't have to deal with some of the problems that they deal with today. So there we definitely extend the support, but also, you know, show them that some of the things that are like common, normal, everyday for you is a privilege or has been a privilege for
But
other
it will,
people.
but it will be a privilege going forward too. Like, you know, what I'm trying to say is it's never been an unprivilege for me not to have a square meal. Okay. So I'm saying certain things. Yes, I mean, I don't think of a day I didn't have clothes. Like, you know what I mean? But I'm grateful still. I don't think drilling down those things into their head, just overall be grateful and
No,
focus
right.
on who you want to be. That is my thing. You want to be.
Correct.
But saying that, okay, oh, you look at, I mean, of course, I will say, you have a phone, give me your phone when she's acting up, like, you know, all those things. But I don't know. I
Yeah,
disagree with saying,
I
oh, you
think
have this, you have a bed, you have a, it's like, again, coming back to dalda, like, you know, you had dalda, you had ghee. Why did you give me ghee? I mean, till today I eat ghee, but am I ungrateful? No, I'm not.
I think it's a good balance of perspective. I think, you know, it kind of is a perfect segue to one of the things that I learned about this Ugadi, the name for this thing. You know, it's just like, you know, it's called the Plavanama Samvatsara, right? You know, Savitaji, I think you said Plava is the board. And then when somebody sent me some other thing, when I started researching, there was this nice line, which is this Durbikshaya Plava iti Tata Shobane Buritoyam. So it is like, you know, apparently this Plava year is supposed to be the bridge between the years years filled with obstacles, like what we had perhaps experienced with, you know, the most preceding year on the year before, like the Vaikari and the Shurwari, where, you know, of course, you know, there is a global pandemic. There is a lot of people that are being subjected to a lot of travesties. And then now this Plava is supposed to be the bridge to cross us to the other side of the fence, where we have, I think, Shobane. I think there's like Shobha or some Santosha. I think, you know, there are two, Shubh and Shobane. I think, you know, there are the 2 years that are upcoming. So this Plava is supposed to be that bridge year. So we are actually supposed to be riding this, you know, greatest year starting from today. But the one thing then when I started reflecting about that, when people tell me that the past 2 years were actually the bad years, I perhaps don't agree with that. You know, I think, you know, what these 2 years, or particularly the COVID-19, is just only the effect of the bad deeds that we have done over the years, whether it could be, you know, the climate change or, you know, excessive consumption, and, you know, all those things resulted into this kind of a pandemic. And I actually believe that this pandemic is actually one of the Dashavataras. You know, it is actually the greatest opportunity for us to discover where we had gone wrong, and then perhaps, you know, do work on a plan to correct or set in a reverse course of action. So in fact, I'm actually most grateful that this COVID-19 has happened to set a course to do correct a course of action. But on the other hand, I also see that this opportunity is being squandered. Going back to the thing that what Kiran and Savita, what you're discussing is, I get very worried. It's not about the basic necessities, whether it's the ghee or food or shelter. I think, you know, more and more people are taking more things for granted. Like, you know, for example, if the temperature is anywhere between, you know, if it actually crosses below 70 or 75, then, you know, people feel like, you know, this is extremely uncomfortable situation. So I think, you know, it's this kind of entitlement, I think we all need to probably move away from. And that's when we all need to be exploring or experiencing, tolerating or embracing, you know, the different ends of the spectrum, like the neem bitter all the way to the sour mango to the jaggery, and you know, all the flavors that come into the pachadi. I actually get worried actually with some of the kids. You know, sometimes it's like, wow, it's too hot. Why can't it be just 73 or, you know, the optimum temperature in the car, wherever we go? I think
right.
that
And it's not just the physical discomfort, right? Srini, I just was sorry to interrupt you, but I don't mean like, you know, physical discomfort or like, you know, the luxuries, you know, pleasures, but more so the emotional tolerance, right? Like if you say something slightly different from like nice, they perceive that as, hey, you're being mean, or you're, you know, things like those little things. Because this is a great, I mean, I don't want to derail the whole Patanjali Yoga Sutra session, but this is an example that I came across very recently, right? So the kid, like when we were young, again, we see somebody, an adult, like we show respect, we express respect, right? Like, say namaste, good morning, whatnot. But the kids here don't necessarily do that. I'm not generalizing, but not all the kids. And if you look at the reason, perhaps, is that because when they grow up, like in preschool, in early educational system, teachers stand outside the school and say good morning, welcome, good morning, welcome. So the kids are used to the fact that, oh, somebody will initiate that niceness, I will reciprocate. Right? It takes them a long way to realize that, hey guys, I have a role to play, right? Being nice to others. So those are some of the foundational things I felt which are setting a different tone in kids' minds. Again, that's one of the scenarios I thought could be leading to the emotional strength.
Yeah. Kiran, but we can't put into a stimulation center for them for every situation and make them experience, right? So life has a way to teach. We can't teach them everything in life and say, oh, I'm going to prepare them with this. They will fall, they will get up, they will have this certain experiences. But I think one thing I want to stop projecting my fears, my experiences. That's how I was raised too, right? They projected. My dad used to say, oh, you're a Kupa Munduka. You don't know what's happening in this world.
If you don't do this, you will end up this way.
All those
like
things.
That.
So I think that generational projection of fears and limitations and short thinking, or whatever you call, not a growth set of fear-based, basically.
Understood. No, that's great point. So I will switch it from fear to empowerment.
Whatever I say, which I feel the kids are much more empathetic here. Oh my God, how kids used to fight back then in India, boys, girls, whatever it is. I think kids here are much more empathetic. They know about sharing. They know about, being nice to others. There are pros and cons, but I feel we should stop projecting our fears and our saying, I mean, basically they have learned from us, right? Where did we get up in the morning and do puja and then leave the house? No, we are rushing out. They saw what we did. Right?
Yep. I think, it's a very good point. I think what has happened is, this is the tradition in India where we have this festivals as a perfect event to reinforce the life truths, right? It's a continuous learning process, but everything was integrated into how we celebrate the festival. Like, hey, you might be having a bad day here. I think, Kiran, what you said is a good thing. It's not just a physical thing, but even the emotional thing. And in the spiritual sadhana, we call this as sometimes a titiksha. One of the things that we all need to practice is ability to tolerate different situations, context, and the moods, and then just move forward. So I think integrating that kind of message into the way we actually celebrate the festivals is actually helps with the continuous learning and relearning. And let's all use this as an opportunity to just, everybody needs to embrace the journey, and we can also collectively reflect and share this learnings. So with that, let's jump into Patanjali's Yoga Sutra study. One of my friends, and some of you have met this weekend, Shailesh, he came in, he attended my class, and he asked me a question after the class yesterday. So it's like, dude, why do you call Patanjali? And it's like, somehow that Patanjali, the T, not the Tha, kind of somehow stuck with me. So I'm actually trying to be very conscious to say Patanjali. So if I ever say Patanjali, please, stop me and correct me. But I'll try to be more conscious of how I say Patanjali's Yoga Sutra study. So what we've done so far is we've in the Ashtanga Yoga, we covered the first 5 limbs. They're more of the Bahiranga sadhana, where yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. We covered the 5. I think what we are entering right now is perhaps the most important aspect of the yoga. This is about the inward journey, or the antaranga sadhana, inner practices, where you're going to go deeper into the self and reunite with the self. So the inner practices consist of 3 things. One is dharana, which we are going to cover today, which is the focus, concentration, the whole. And then the second one is that dhyana, meditation, which we're going to cover in the next session. And then samadhi. Samadhi is the total immersion or total absorption. And then ultimately we're going to lead into perhaps the core essence of yoga, which is about samyama. And I'm a big fan of samyama, which is perhaps the most important yogic technique that we can teach all the kids and adults, so that we have an opportunity to pursue excellence or achieve excellence in all of our pursuits. Samyama essentially means the total control. Yama, niyama, pranayama, we covered. Yama means control. We talked about lots of different controls. Like yama is how do we control our behaviors towards others. Niyama is how do we control our behaviors towards ourselves. Pranayama is control of the breath. And then ultimately, we're all going to get into samyama, which is about the total control of the mind. So you literally can plant whatever the thought that you want, and then, and then direct your attention to whatever you want to achieve. And then that's the ultimate universal truth of how to achieve excellence. So let's focus on dharana. Anybody wants to share anything about antaranga sadhana or what we're up to for today? So let's continue. I think, we talked about this. Vivekananda beautifully said, our minds are like monkeys. And not only that, these are not just the monkeys, these are drunken monkeys. These monkeys are drunk with the wine of desires and a lot of, pursuits, external, pursuits and the needs and the wants. And in fact, we covered about the 5 kleshas, the root of all the kleshas, which is avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So it's wine of desires, and then it's bitten by a scorpion with the jealousy and the huge ego full of pride. And this context, and then that is constantly chasing different things, different situations, and puts the mind into a very turbulent state. And then that results in, if you gently observe what's happening in your mind TV, the screen, it's actually projecting multiple different images at the same time. When we are here, we are constantly talking about, okay, what's after this class? What do we need to do tomorrow, or what's the thought? So it's always about pursuing this thought, next thought, and this thought. So this is the state of the mind that is there. And then now when we look at the statistics, and I think Dr. Sunil talked about in our last class, where the attention deficit disorder is actually growing tremendously among the kids. In fact, my daughter also tells me, my younger one, is like she's having a difficulty in the concentration, so she's actually going through some of this therapy and the consultation where it's all about the breathing and so on and so forth. So it's not that she doesn't have a great IQ, but that IQ is not being fully leveraged to achieve her true potential because of the lack of ability to concentrate and focus. So this is the state of the problem, and to solve that is dharana. So as I said in the WhatsApp group, recently Ramakanji and I were attending some of the Yoga Sutra workshops that are being done by one of the temples here, JK Yoga Temple, and they have a nice format. They actually go through a hands-on workshop. So, and when I looked at that content, I felt like, in the end, instead of making it more like a lecture mode, it would be fantastic if we can actually make it more of a collaborative session. What I would like to do is, does anybody have any thoughts about where we are seeing more, whether amongst ourselves, our families, or what we see around, where we are seeing, the lack of concentration affecting the most, or any symptoms or any difficulties that you're facing? Anybody wants to share anything? Or Sunil, Dr. Sunil?
Obviously, I see these kids suffering from ADD requesting medications. I try to tell them about, focus on meditation, focus on asanas. A lot of times, I think the parents don't provide them any incentive. Just give them some Adderall or these medications. They just come requesting that because I think other kids are taking, so they want to be on dean's list, and they say, okay, if I take it, I can stay awake all night and study for exams. So there is a lot of this YouTube videos also where kids know how to check the boxes for ADD on the forms, and then they check those boxes so that they fulfill the criteria for diagnosis, and then they know what medication they want. So it is very well organized. And there are, and one kid told me, oh, every kid knows what form you will give, what check boxes have to check, and obviously what medication they want, and they want to take it during exams, other days. So there is a significant problem with this ADD and dependence on medications. So I try to, move them towards, obviously meditation and yoga. And sometimes this also is some people perceive yoga, and obviously when I say yoga, some people perceive it as a religion. So that also I have to hesitate sometimes, when I say yoga, and they always look a little bit differently if they are not open to the other ideas. So I can't tell in some patients. So there is a problem, but I do see this issue in kids very often. Even in adults, adult ADD became very common. That diagnosis itself bothers me. Adult ADD. Yeah, but they are on medications, and it's external things controlling them. So yeah, I personally try to meditate half an hour before going to sleep. I just basically switch off lights, everything, and I just no light, no sound, just lay down. If necessary, like a very prolonged om, just in the background, just very low volume. And it helps me to go sleep also. I think maybe it helps me focus. That's what I learned.
That's I mean, it's a big problem. Everybody's trying to go for the prescriptive medications, as a shortcut to getting wherever they want. The one thing that I'm actually realizing is when I look at my own self-study, what I thought for a long time is, in fact, and I struggle with this, I thought multitasking is my virtue. And wherever we go, it is like, if you have 30 minutes of driving, we plan a lot for like, what do we need to watch? What do we need to listen? How do I make this 30 minutes as the most productive thing? And sometimes in this tricky mind, gives us into this ROI kind of techniques. And sometimes, I'm even trying to do that even with my yoga practice, which is like, why can't I put Vishnu Sahasranama with meaning so that, sometimes, I'm doing this plus also trying to absorb some of the Sanskrit words. And that way I optimize that 1.5 hour or whatever I'm doing, also use that time to work on my asanas and also passive learning. So this is all the things that's continuously happening. And I think, but of course, the practice of this Ashtanga yoga allows you to, when you are in the moment, you be there for 100 to 200%. It's almost like a CPU multitasking, where when you are processing a task, you go fully. But I'm now seeing that this is becoming a universal pattern where we're always trying to do more things at the same time. And at the same time, we are not giving our best to any situation that you're in the moment. And that is a big crisis. And the same thing, like when we sit for meditation, suddenly you become aware of all the body pains, right? You're thinking about your back, you're thinking about this, and you're thinking about your fatigue. And at the same time, you also have like what we talked about in the Pratyahara in the last class, you kind of, even though you're not pursuing it, you have these sensory projections from the Gyanendriyas, where it actually talks about what if, what is going to happen, what about the taste of bhaksha or this or that. And you're constantly being stimulated to let your mind drop. Dharana, precisely what it means is, it's about hold. In Sanskrit, dharana means to be able to hold. It comes from the root word of dri. It actually means like to be able to hold one thing. How can we allow our mind to hold to one thought at a time? That's precisely what it is, right? So that you live with that thought in the Ekatattva Abhyasa, you unite with that, and then you go deep and process that image at the subtlest level of detail. But unfortunately, we just process that at 10%, 20% level of detail, and then we immediately jump to other thought, and then we process so many things. And the environment that we are living in right now, particularly the digital world that we are in, it's exacerbating this problem. Like what Priyaji was saying, it's almost becoming a compulsory habit for us to constantly check our Facebook or LinkedIn. And I think, when I met Kiran, Gopi and their family, I was super inspired with their digital hygiene. I believe, Kiran, you have a strict digital hygiene program, right, at home?
Yeah, thank you for giving it a name, but basically we're trying to be mean to kids, but just trying to kind of limit the usage at certain times and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was super inspired. In fact, in Palo Alto, when I, meet some of my colleagues and so on and so forth, they have these practices where literally, before going to everybody's, bedrooms, they have some baskets to drop all their digital devices. And the digital devices are not allowed in anybody's kids or anybody's bedrooms. So you have to drop them and then you just go. I mean, and people are actually following this so religiously because the state of the problem is so acute right now. I mean, even I look at myself. I mean, I in fact, I need my cell phone to be able to, have some nice, listening of, some of the things, to be able to do it. Even for meditation, we need some kind of a digital device. I think, we need to go back to, reading books or, just, anchoring in your breath. But I think the state of the problem is so acute. And I think this is one muscle that we need to build. And then eventually we need to teach people, this art of samyama. And I think, one of the things, Dr. Sunil, I'll talk to you. One of the initiatives that I'm trying to work on is without actually putting yoga in the front, how do we put yoga in the back, but rather, how do we allow people to, just focus on mindfulness. There is no tag of yoga because, yoga sometimes might have a religious connotation, but rather, hey, this is the secret to your excellence, or this is secret to, being a better entrepreneur or a better leader, or just, be more mindful of your action. I think, perhaps that is the right positioning of the messaging that we need to take on. Savita ji, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, coming back to my challenges, challenge is it's pretty similar to yours, Sriniji. Putting too many tasks in a day, and when I don't complete one of them, and that has a domino effect for me. I'm like, oh, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And what happens? My concentration for the next task or whatever that is chipped off. And I have to tell myself orally, loudly sometimes, it's okay. You can always do it tomorrow. So sometimes, yeah, having to multitasking is my challenge as well. And not any unmet duties or actions. It upsets me that I didn't either manage my time or either why didn't it happen is my question. How come it didn't happen? And that affects the next action, the next following actions. And in a way, instead of continuing the process, I would probably not do two or three more. So, yeah, that's so I think I would say that is also something like concentration, focus, and holding. Probably, I'm not sure.
What I'm realizing is, I mean, for me, I have this huge condition mind, right? In the business side, somehow we're always looking for ROI. So the ROI is when you do too many things. So I think what I figured out is it's great to be able to prosecute many things. I mean, like, for example, if you're the president of the United States, you cannot just go process one at a time. The only thing is, but when you are doing one thing, whether that is for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever the thing, when you are in something, be one with that thought. Be one with that thought. And then shift gears. I think that actually what I'm noticing is when I'm trying to practice that, I'm actually finding a lot more free time. I'm finding a lot more free time. I think when I get this thing of the ROI, the moment when I approach a task of, okay, I'm spending 30 minutes or 60 minutes for my yoga practice, what more things can I add into it? Can I also use this as my learning, practice? Can I also use this for something else, right? I think that's when I realized that I'm letting my mind win over my stuff. And I think because the mind is playing the trick of the ROI. But ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to just unite with yourself, just enjoy that experience. All you need is the sound of your own breath and the vibrations within your body. I mean, that probably is going to give you the most important or the most exuberant expression of your practice, but not these other things. But and again, this is always something that we need to watch out for, and that is something that I'm aware of. Hopefully I will make more of a habit of just doing a silent practice where I'm anchoring more in my own breath and the vibrations. But I think this multitasking, it's not like multitasking is not a great thing, but rather it's almost like a multi-context. When you're in a context, just be in oneness with that. And moving on, one of the techniques
multitasking is a myth, isn't it? Multitasking is a myth. Apparently the brain can't, maybe Sunilji can confirm that. The brain can apparently can only focus on one thing at a time. It really can't be in too many places.
Exactly. I mean, there is some certain elements of science, like, it can only process, I think, 90 bits per second, some microsecond of the information. So if you actually, like, even if there are two people talking at the same time, your mind can only absorb like, about 60%. If three people are talking at the same time, mind just simply falls apart, right? The thing is, what I was referring to is, like going back to the analogy of a president. If a president has to take on so many different things, but the way you do that is you slide this into a schedule where, like, okay, this 15 minutes, I'm going to focus on, let's say, Iran. The 15 minutes, I'm going to focus on COVID. So when you are dedicating that time, be one with that situation. But within a moment, don't try to process too many things. I think that's where the mind actually comes in. Like, for example, when I'm doing this yoga, I'm also trying to combine with, Sanskrit study and this and this stuff. So those are all like, you're letting mind win over you more and more and more, right? So anytime there is a mathematical formula that's happening in your mind, you literally letting the mind win over you. So one of the things is, we already covered about dharana. So Patanjali revealed one of the secrets on how we can actually improve the mind's focus. So in fact, when we talked about pranayama, one of the two benefits of the pranayama is the second benefit that Patanjali revealed is dharanasucha yogyata manasaha. Dharanasucha yogyata manasaha. So in other words, by practicing pranayama, you will be qualified, or you are actually meeting the prerequisites to be able to focus your mind on one thought. So pranayama plays a major role is in actually improving one's focus capabilities. In fact, almost all the therapies that I know of for the kids that have ADHD, they actually use breath as a breath control as one of the important techniques. And what's happening is, people that have these attention disorders, or people don't have this concentration, that immediately the next consequence of that is they actually develop anxiety skills or lack of sleep, because they're not able to concentrate in the class that they are in. Suddenly they will not be able to follow the curriculum, and then it gets mounted, and then they go to the next class, that gets mounted, and that gets mounted, and suddenly there is a big mountain in front of them that they believe that they cannot conquer, and then that leads them to a lot of anxiety and so on and so forth. So the best part is to anchor yourself in the pranayama type of breathing, so that you let the oxygen clears the entire mind, so that you can be in the oneness of the moment, so that your mind can process whatever you are prosecuting at the time, so that you have an opportunity to succeed. So pranayama, we already covered this, which is that dharanasucha yogyata manasaha. Pranayama is one of the benefits. Now, how did Patanjali define dharana? There is one Yoga Sutra. In fact, what we covered last time is, the second chapter is the Sadhana Pada, which is the Ashtanga Yoga, where Patanjali defined the Ashtanga Yoga. In the Sadhana Pada, Patanjali only covered the first 5 links. And then he actually put a chapter break, and then he moved on to the chapter 3, which is the Vibhuti Pada. This is where he starts revealing some of the powers that you're going to get once you start attaining control over your mind. So the Vibhuti Pada starts with the first sutra on defining dharana. And the way Patanjali defined dharana is deshabandhascha deshabandha chittasya dharana. It's a very simple sutra. So desha is a place of awareness in your body, a place of awareness in your body. And chittasya is like, when your mind is dharana. When you fix your mind to one place of awareness in your body, one place or one place awareness in your body, or Desha is a place, usually we try to focus on your body or, visualization like a Ajna chakra or something like that. That's precisely what Dharana is. So the simple technique is you're actually trying to gently bring your mind, the chitta, and you're trying to hold it to one place of awareness. And then this is actually not a forceful containment or forceful focus, but you are actually allowing it. So the way is your mind is going to constantly drift apart into different things. And what you're doing is you're gently trying to bring it back to the one place of awareness that you so choose. If you try to tame it, in other words, you try to forcefully try to do it, then what happens is you're not going to succeed. The mind eventually is going to become the more master. So what you need to do is you just be very patient, like in a Vairagya, be gentle, being not judgmental, just be aware of the thoughts that are actually going in. And then you slowly bring it back to, the one place of awareness. Your only job is to only focus on the place of awareness. And then be aware that your mind is going to drift apart, but you're going to stay with your own place of awareness. So the simple technique is Desha Bandhascha Chittasya Dharana. Desha Bandhas Chittasya Dharana. So which is like always you need to have a prop for this. For any focus of the concentration, you need to have a prop, because a place of awareness that could be a point in your body, or most of the time we also take in help of an external prop. So there are different techniques. Like japa is one of the highest form of the sadhana, and then there is trataka kriya, there is mindfulness. I think a lot of people now, there are meditation tools or meditation apps. I always refer them to as mindfulness. We'll talk about what is meditation in the next session. Pranayama, and sometimes we even actually trick the mind to actually do reverse counting. So there are so many tools to actually help the mind to focus on or hold on to one thought. And there is a big difference between dharana and dhyana. So dhyana meditation is that state where you're already in that your mind is continuously flowing with a stream of thoughts, or continuously flowing with an image that is fixed on one thing. But dharana is the preparatory step towards getting into dhyana. So when you are in that completely, when your mind is not drifting apart, that's when you enter into the meditation state, which we're going to cover the next time. Does it make sense? The way the Patanjali defined. Any questions?
I know what is japa, but how do you explain japa?
So japa is very simple. I mean, we have a lot of different things. So japa is literally like, what is Desha Bandhasya? You basically fix your not focus. You shift your focus awareness to one place. In the case of japa, it could be a bead, and then your mantra, your whatever the initiation mantra that you have, or it could even be Om. And then what you're doing is you're constantly meditating, or not meditating, but you're constantly shift your attention, shift your focus to that one anchor, keeping it very simple, and you're only doing that. So that is what we refer to as a japa. And the mantra is essentially is like, man is the one that actually controls the mind is the mantra, the one that actually holds it tight. Antra is actually a mantra. So the way I look at the japa is you basically fix your mind on any one mantra, or any one signature, any one action, and then doing that repeatedly again and again and again is what is called as japa. So what you're doing is when you fix your mind to that one thought, in this case, the prop of a mantra, eventually as you increase this, what we call as the Nirodha Samskara. We talked about this, right? There is a Uddhana Samskara where the mind is projecting outwards. And then Nirodha Samskara is where you actually strengthen in the muscle, that where you're actually going more inwards. As you get deeper and deeper into the japa, your mind automatically gives in. It knows that you are so steadfast in your pursuit of that simple one mantra or the japa that you're actually doing. And the longer that you being very steadfast and determined and that you're actually doing it, ultimately their mind gives in. And then it just gets locked into the japa that you're actually doing. And then when you do that, that's when you enter into the dhyana state. So japa to me is the preparatory step to get into that. Any thoughts? Does it make sense, or did I confuse you more?
No, it makes sense.
Yeah. And in fact, in one of the Yoga Foundation's camp that we did in November, where Priya and some of my friends were there, they actually had an interesting question. So in fact, my friend said, it's like he tried all these techniques like the japa with the beats and so on and so forth. But what he basically said was, when he is actually, the beat has like the 108, right? The 108, beats, and that you're supposed to continuously chant this, for this 108. What he was saying is the mind was actually focused more on, when he was doing the beat, his mind was always saying like, when do I get to the 108? Because 108 for him is a victory. Like he did it one iteration and this stuff. So then he felt like, he's actually not controlling the mind, but rather he's letting the mind actually get ahead of him. And he feels like he's number one, he's not succeeding, but he's actually more failing. And one aspect that Sri Ramji explained was that even though you feel like you're failing whenever you sit for either japa or meditation, you feel like you're not making progress, but what you're doing is you're actually strengthening that muscle of the Nirodha Samskara. You're actually, doing that. And then there is a Yoga Sutra that basically says, Kramanyatvam Parinamanyatve Hetuhu, which is like these small steps that you do repeatedly again and again that ultimately lead to the transformation. You cannot see the transformation right away. Like when you boil the water, you only see the transformation of the vapor after the water gets heated to about, every molecule gets heated to the 100 degrees. And then that's when the transformation starts happening. But all the time, every molecule is being heated. So every japa effort that you're actually putting in is actually contributing to that, in a majorly towards the transformation. What I shared as from my own experience is, instead of looking for that knot of the 108, for me in the japa, every beat that you're moving is a victory for yourself. That's an infinite movement. So instead of looking for, okay, did I get to the knot? Did I get to the knot? In fact, I don't even know why we have this knots actually in the japa mala, with that 108 and other stuff. In fact, for me, every beat that you move is that infinite movement. That's a victory. So the goal is to be in oneness with that one beat movement. And that's where you celebrate everything. I was like, I did that. And then when you get to the next beat, you again, chant your mantra, and then, score that as a victory, and then, live through the infinite, and then you move on. There is no reason for you to have the number that you need to do. Again, that is just my own perspective. I mean, of course, there is a reason why there is a 108, that is there. And that is, very much aligned with the stars and so on and so forth. For me, when I'm actually trying to do the japa or japa, or even when we do the asana practice, in the sun salutations, like as an example, there is 12 steps. But forget about the 12 steps. If you can actually be in one with every movement that you're actually doing and live it fully and observe, all the alignment and the sensation, the vibration. And that's when you are actually trying to live that moment in its full entirety. And of course, it's going to drift apart. But again, you gently would bring it back to, okay, what is this, like say, half lunge to the right, and then how does my leg to the head, the top of the head feeling, and how is my breath, how is my vibrations? I mean, there's so much detail to unite with in every moment. In fact, what I have to say is a yogist journey is to discover the infinite. Every finite moment, how do we make that as an infinite? Because every moment there is an infinite amount of dynamic activity that's happening both within and outside. To be able to absorb all of that, it takes a lot of concentration. So our job is to make every moment, prosecute every moment from being a finite to an infinite. And that's how we become infinite, not by adding extra days to our life. what we call as a Mrityorma Amritangamaya. It's not by adding some extra days or extra years or whatever. It's about making every finite moment an infinite, and this amount, the tremendous amount of detail. Does it make sense, or is my interpretation does it make sense, or?
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
a
a
good
great point.
interpretation. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
And-
And I really like the example that you gave, right? Like, it's not necessarily, chanting a particular mantra or, just choosing a particular activity, but rather whatever we are doing, really immersing in that. And at the end of it, you kind of feel that, oh, I was really lost for that period of time, right? Sometimes it happens with, some of the classes that we take where we're really like, immersed, and you just come out feeling fresh, and sometimes it's even like people, others can also notice that. I have seen, as an example, I used to go to this Sangeetam class, right, like music class, and when I get back home, like, time and again Gopi would say that, hey, like, what did you do? You look different. Right? So for some time I thought, like, he's kind of joking and all, but he consistently said that, and that made me really realize that, there are certain things which are equivalent to, practicing this dharana, right? Like you're kind
Yeah.
of completely in that moment.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're saying is even the highest, when you totally lose yourself and you only become the music, and then that's when it becomes samadhi, right? You get totally immersed in it and you lose your own sense of identity. I mean, the same thing here, right? This is a simple technique. Like when you ask any one of the professional cricketers, like Sachin Tendulkar, they don't go out there to say, like, today I have to score 300 runs. No, their only job is to be in the moment. The only is like, how do I hit this ball that comes to me and then hit it the best that I can? When you actually bring it down to that moment of what the ball is, and then how do I get it outside of the ground, or how best that I can actually do this. In fact, one of my executive coaches in Apple, he actually said, the people that are actually the real professionals, like either Bruce Lee or Michael Jordan or some other people, is they delay their action. For them, the world actually happens in a slow motion. You don't react, or you don't set anything in your mind of what to score. You let the world and the action unfold and this stuff. Your action only starts until it's almost like the delayed binding in computer science, right? And that's how you need to do it. So when you are actually operating the world like a slow motion, there is no anxiety, because you are actually being the laziest dude that's out there. And your action is measured with what is that the whole universe is actually getting to you, so that you can actually give the right response for that. So I think most of the time we are actually either ahead, and then you're trying to do it, your mind puts it ahead on the thing, but live that moment. And the same thing, I think most of the people in the japa, like what my friend asked this question, is just like his job is like, when do I get to the knot? Because that for him, that was the victory. The 25 runs or whatever, or the bowler and this stuff. But it's not the end of this. It's about what you are doing, and then go try to be in the oneness. I mean, there's some tremendous amount of detail. And then when you build that muscle, we're going to experience the state that Kiran was referring to, where you actually totally experience a samadhi-like experience. Right. And then the next technique is Trataka Kriya. This is something that I think we should do more of. I mean, in fact, we were just doing, after Savitaji sent that YouTube video about the eyes and the feet movement. I started doing the eye focus exercises. I mean, that's a little bit of a Trataka, but without the candle. Trataka Kriya is also something that I think, if you can do that, that will significantly improve our concentration. So the way we do the Trataka is, light a candle, and then what we have to do is, sit such that, your eye gaze is, in line with the flame, or the light of the candle. And then you just, without blinking, you just look into it, or look at it without blinking, until you have tears, come out. And then once the tears are there, then gently close your eyes, and then visualize the candle, your inner world, or in your Jyotishmati, or in your mind. And this practice, when it is practiced repeatedly, number one, it improves your focus. It also strengthens your eye muscle, and it also builds more intuition. Actually, it builds more intuition. So that's the reason when we are doing this practices, if you can keep the eyes without blinking, and then follow this and pray that will also an ability to use your eye gaze to improve your dharana skills. Did anyone try this? Or does anyone practice this on a regular basis, Prataka?
Not every day, Ji, but I think I do it frequently. I also ask my son to do it because he generally tries to drift away, and I find this very good to focus.
I've been practicing after the COVID, and it's an interesting exercise actually. I love that experience.
Yeah, I
Anybody
wanted to
else
share.
can-
Yeah, so I haven't tried this with a candle, but when Shauryan, he was in kindergarten, his eyesight, they said, you need to wear glasses, but it is very much in the margin. So my father-in-law being a doctor, right? He's let him kind of practice naturally. Once he puts on the glasses, he will be tuned to the glasses. Long story short, we tried some of the eye exercises, including the one that you said, right? Like you fix the gaze at one point until the tears come out, right? Including all the eye rotations and all. We tried that consistently, and surprisingly, if not in the longest run, but the next year he did the test without glasses again, right? Every year they do the test. Next year he did the test. He was not, prescribed glasses.
Oh,
So
wow.
to some extent, we were able to delay. I mean, right now he does have astigmatism, not necessarily the sight. So for astigmatism, we are having him wear glasses so that it doesn't get worse. But I definitely saw that to some extent, these exercises in reality helped him.
Actually, one of my friends, what they do is when they come out, they go outside and they basically look at any green grass or something, or even lake, and then they just do the Trataka with something. And I think that also helps this. I mean, what a fantastic story. This is a proven case study. Case study in his family. I think these are some of the natural things. And in fact, what we also see is, because of the too much of screen exposure, this tremendous amount of fatigue. Your eyes get tired so much, and that results in sleep issues and a lot of these things. So we need to incorporate this Sukshma Yoga of the eye exercises so much more. And Savitaji's that YouTube video was quite even so profound. Actually, it's almost like
somebody forwarded it, so I forwarded it, not mine.
No, yeah, thank you for sharing. I watched the video too. It was very insightful.
Yeah. So
yeah, I have started doing it in my yoga practice now. When I do yoga, I include that.
Yeah, that's okay. And then we also covered one more dharana technique in the first chapter when we covered the 9 obstacles. And then one of the 9 strategies that Patanjali revealed is this is where Vishayavativa Pravartirupanna Manasane Bandhanaha. So where instead of letting our attention drift apart, processing all these different sensory perceptions, what Patanjali said is you can also control your mind by at any one time amplifying your attention and the focus on any one sensory perception. That's also one strategy that we can actually do at Vishayavativa. So go deeper with just one sensation at a time. Like one of the things that we try to do, which is something that I practice a lot, which is closing your eyes and then just picking any one music or meditation and stuff, and then go unite with lots and lots of details of what are all the different sounds. Like for example, if you use the Tibetan bell or some other stuff, try to go observe the subtlest of the sound vibrations, and then go unite with every moment what is the sound that is there, and then try to go unite with that. That is one way you can actually use hearing as a way to do that. And then Prataka is that you are using sight as a way to bring your attention to one point. Similarly, we can use smell, like nice perfume, and then go deeper with that. So there are, again, other strategies that we can actually follow. And this is another technique that we can actually do. So this is, again, I think for our inner practices, this dharana is probably the most foundational element. Only when this is something that we have to practice. Meditation is something that you don't practice, just like sleep. Sleep you don't practice. Sleep you just need to allow it to happen. Similarly, dharana is that preparatory step to actually get into meditation. So all the things that we are actually doing, pranayama, japa, and Trataka Kriya, or doing this Vishavati meditation, and there are a bunch of other things, or any of the other mindfulness. All those things are the strategies that we have to build the dharana muscle. And then once you become the master of this, then we actually then get into meditation. Then we actually move into the samadhi, the next stage, and then ultimately that results in samyama. And this is perhaps one of the most limbs that we need to practice in our daily sadhana. And one of the questions that I got in one of the sessions was, somebody said, is watching TV a good dharana practice? It's like, hey, I can, there is an interesting drama or thriller, I get so much focused on it, and I don't really care about anything that is actually happening. In fact, we even said that could even be a samadhi, where you lose aware of everything else. The only reason why the TV or those things are not qualified is the right dharana experiences or dharana or samadhi experiences. In that case, you're not in control. Your mind is in the control of an external thing, in this case the TV or the show. What we are doing is, we being the practitioner of the yoga, we are actually controlling the mind. So we are who is the master? So the master is us. So in the case of a TV or a movie, somebody else is the master, and they are basically arresting your mind, or they are controlling your mind. So that's why those things, unfortunately, they don't give us any brownie points or the points, in our practice. So the best thing is, we should shut down the TV as much as possible. So that's all I have. And then there is a quick worksheet that I sent out, which is like, something for your own, self-evaluation, to figure out how much of the time that you're actually observing that we are in that oneness moment and the focused mind, and what are the tools and strategies that we could potentially follow. So that's all I have. Alpaji, any comments that you have? Okay, if not, so let's conclude this today's session with the chanting of Om 3 times, and then we'll conclude it. Take a deep breath. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Rub our palms with the fire and love of knowledge. Copper eyes. Divyam Dadamite Chakshu. With a bright smile, gently open your eyes. What a fantastic evening that you guys shared with us. Kiran, Dr. Sunil, and Savita, thank you for sharing your insights. Let's eat more bakshas and bobatlu, and we'll meet. Let's actually practice dharana with bobatlu. I think that's a fantastic.
No more
Yeah,
but there's no more left.
No, so we definitely need some dharana to make bobatlu. So we're gonna practice that way. It takes some serious concentration and focus.
It's actually fantastic. So we'll see you again on Saturday. We'll talk again.
Thank you all.
Dhanyavad.
Catching up.